Welcome to the Outlier Mindset Podcast, your guide for living a life by design. Here, we explore the journey of becoming an outlier, finding your purpose, mastering your mindset, optimizing your health, achieving financial freedom, and building a life centered around your passions. So tune in, transform, and thrive. Welcome to the Outlier Mindset. Let the journey begin. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Outlier Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Robin Schley, and today we've got somebody who has successfully made the leap from corporate to entrepreneurial leader, Kyle McDowell. For the past 3 decades, Kyle has amassed an impressive track record of delivering superior results, cultivating authentic leaders, and driving cultural transformation. In his Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller, Begin with We, he examines the root causes of dysfunction in business, providing a revolutionary framework that shifts corporate culture with what he calls the 10 W's. Kyle, welcome to the show, my friend.
Good afternoon, Rodman. Man, this is one that I've been looking forward to doing. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk shop with you and hopefully add some value to your audience. Thanks for having me.
I'm sure you're going to add a lot of value today, and we're going to talk a lot about leadership. I know that's something that's really important to you, something that you love talking about and teaching about. So we're going to do a lot. I'm going to just tell people right now, they ought to get their notebooks out and be ready to take in a lot of knowledge today, because I know that this is going to be a fantastic conversation.
Thank you. I hope so. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, let's come right out of the gates. You know, we talk a lot about being an outlier, being different, a lot of what it takes to be different, to be exceptional in everything that we're doing. And a lot of that comes down to also being just a good leader, a good hardcore leader. What does that mean to you? What does it mean to be a good leader?
I think it means a lot, but if I had to distill it to a bumper sticker or 1 or 2 sentences, it is about bringing the best out of others in pursuit of an aligned mission or a common mission. And if we drill down a little deeper into that, it essentially means I, as a leader, am more concerned and focused on what you bring to the table, your development, your growth, because I recognize if I'm successful at that objective, by definition, I will be successful and thrive as well. And then the third win of the win-win-win is we as the team, we win. And I think that is an often overlooked or under-considered element of what's required to be an effective leader, is the emphasis and time and energy and care that you put into the development of others. Because you can develop yourself all day long, every day long, every day as a leader. But if you don't do the same for those around you, that's not a recipe for sustained success. Not only in my opinion, in my experience, because I lived that for a while.
Yeah. Well, I know I've served in a lot of leadership roles, just like you have. And I always tell people that leadership is selfless. Leadership is not about the me. It's not about the I. It's about what can I do to lift others up? How can I bring them up? How can I make them excel? How can I get them where they want to be in life? And I think a lot of people in leadership positions, you look at a lot of people in those positions today, and a lot of them work out of a place of selfishness.
Right on.
And I've always believed that the greatest leaders on the planet are the ones who lead selflessly.
So true. And, I'd be curious to hear your take on this, because I admit openly and on any kind of platform I'm given that the first 20 plus years of my career in the corporate world, corporate America, I was that guy, man. I focused exclusively on my own title, my comp, my bonus, my career accolades, how far I could go. And, by most accounts, I had a really, really successful run the first 20 plus years. But I've learned in hindsight, the price that I paid for that in terms of alienating others. I thought my teams respected me. They actually feared me, which is embarrassing to admit years later. Cost me a marriage, cost me some health, probably lost years of my life because I was running so hard to promote my own self. And luckily for me, I was able to find the right side, and that means focusing on the we and investing my time and energy in those around me.
Yeah, it seems to me too, like you talk about the successes you had. A lot of people are successful going into that selfish space, but how much greater could they have been if they came at it from a selfless angle?
It sounds cliche, right? Here are a couple of guys talking about how important it is to be a great leader and the impact you can have. But when you are faced with adversity, or you're faced with maybe a team that is a little bit dysfunctional or toxic even, it's easy to slip into boss mode. And as well as anybody, if not better, a boss and a leader are not even close to the same thing.
Correct.
I was a great boss for a lot of years. I think I found my leadership stride maybe the last decade of my career. But and I got to be honest, brother. One of the reasons I was so excited to join your show came from your intro, not of me, but of your intro of the show. Every episode, you talk about being purpose driven and the life that you deserve to have. And to me, that is so well connected to where I'm trying to encourage both from the stage and my executive coaching clients is, if you want to be a great leader and establish a leadership legacy, two words that aren't used very often together, a leadership legacy, you have to make that choice. And it's not a one-time choice, man. As you know, it's a daily choice. You have to remind yourself every single day, this is what I signed up for. And it ain't easy. So it's easy to slide back to that boss mode. Did you ever wrestle with that yourself coming up through the corporate world? Like, were there times of your career where you felt more like a boss than a leader, or maybe somewhere in between?
Yeah, it's funny. You kind of straddle lines at times. And, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, but in terms of the boss, it's kind of like I'll have my companies that I've got going, and you got to come in and, of course, you want to lead, right? But it's sometimes, when things aren't quite going the way they should, or people aren't stepping up to the task, or people aren't doing what they should, all of a sudden a little bit of that boss comes out, right? Where you're going to be like, okay, instead of asking for the inputs, I'm going to start pushing down what I want people to be doing. And, people aren't usually nearly as productive when you're pushing down information as when you're letting that stuff come up. So as a good leader, those are the times where I've always felt you need to step up. You need to go to the people that are working with you or for you or whatever you want to call that, and then really encourage and embrace their inputs to try to lift everything up instead of pushing down what you want. Does that make sense?
It makes 100% sense. And I have found, at least throughout my journey, the more you slide into that boss role where you come into the meeting and say, here's what we're doing, here's how we're doing it, especially in times of adversity, the team is sent the message, you don't really value our opinion. You may value our opinion on a Wednesday when we don't have the pressure of a board meeting coming Friday, or there's this really sticky customer situation. You may allow me to flex and be my best self during those times. But when the deck is stacked against us, you come in and just start driving orders. They recognize that. They recognize you value my opinion unless things are really serious. And I think that sends a message that our teams and the workforce at large, they recognize that you only value my opinion until you don't. So I think it's important to be even keeled and kind of level with the amount and the encouragement that we give our teams in terms of asking for their input on our collective journey. It needs to come every day as often as possible. Now, listen, man, for your audience, I'm not naive. There are times when the leader has to say, this is what we're doing. Appreciate the pushback. If you know that we're heading down the wrong path, you are obligated to point that out. But we're in a situation where someone's got to make a call. I'm making that call, but here's why I'm making that call. Like sharing that why is just absolutely essential. It's almost as critical as what we're doing, the why of what we're doing. So I just feel like being consistent in how we embrace the input from others, how we challenge others to be their best, to allow us to be our collective best, is a really important thing to remember.
No, I couldn't agree more. And, we all face challenges on these journeys, whether you're in a corporate environment, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you've got a business, whatever it might be. We've all got those ups and downs. We go through those cycles and we're trying to fight through something, or we're trying to work through something, or we have a problem, a difficulty. But the way that you can do it, and we can push things down. We can say, hey, this is what I need. This is what I need to happen. I really need this to happen for us as a company. But leaders will go in then and empower those same people to go in and make those changes, or
Right.
to go in and lift everybody up. Or, I mean, there's consequences if you don't. Some people, maybe they don't have the leadership in them, or maybe they don't have the foresight to look out into the future to make things really good or the way things need to be.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of people that might be eventually leaving your organization. But at the end of the day, a strong leader is surrounded by other strong leaders and other strong thought leaders.
So true. So true.
Yeah.
I tell the story in my book about Steve Kerr, now the head coach of the Golden State Warriors, who, if you're my age or anything close to my age, you remember Steve Kerr first as a player, as a superstar player for the Chicago Bulls. But did you know, I found this in the research for my book, before he joined the Chicago Bulls, Steve Kerr was an underwhelmingly average player. I think he averaged like 4 points a game, something completely forgettable, until he joined the Bulls, where, clearly the leader of that team was Michael Jordan, who by almost all accounts was a maniac in terms of bringing the best out of others and how hard he pushed people, maybe to a fault at times, some stories might indicate. But Steve Kerr will be the first to tell you that transition from him being a 4-point player to being, the guy that hit a couple of threes to win championships would not have happened if it weren't for Jordan's leadership and his maniacal approach to bring the most and best out of everybody. I love that story.
Yeah. And he's a fantastic leader. That's carried over into his coaching roles and,
Right on.
and everything that he's done. I mean, that's the thing is sometimes we need to be put in the right situations to really excel also. Right.
So true.
Like he was putting out 4 points a game, but he was just in the wrong environment, in the wrong situation. He didn't have the room to excel. And that's kind of one of those things where it's really important for people in life to be able to get up, be in the right situation, the right place, doing what they are meant to be doing in life. Because if you're not purpose driven, if you're not sitting there doing what you are meant to be doing, it's just a recipe for disaster. That's where you really start to kind of, I don't want to use the word fail, but you're just kind of like, I don't know, you're sinking more than you're swimming.
Drifting.
Because you're just not in the right position to thrive.
Yeah. Hey man, I would actually, I'll pile on to what you said and be a little bit more direct. I think it's a recipe, not for failure, but for mediocrity, which is worse than failure. Because out of failure, you can learn. You can say, okay, that was not the right path, or we made this mistake. We need to go this direction. We obviously, whatever recipe we cooked up here, something didn't go right. Mediocrity doesn't have that sentinel event. Mediocrity allows me to be, lather, rinse, repeat, that whole expression allows me to be the exact same vanilla, uninspired, uninspiring life, which is again, I think the message that you spread and why it's so important. It's not so clearly being purpose-driven on my health, being purpose-driven on how I approach my loved ones, my wife, and just me as a human. Like it's being, but I think when in my line of work, trying to reshape and transform bosses into leaders and create cultures of excellence, I've found that those that are focused on being really great, they think differently, they approach their jobs differently, they approach it as if they have the ability and the obligation to help others instead of just deliver business results. So when we're purpose driven to say, yeah, I got a job. I mean, and the number one reason I have this job is I got to make money because I have bills, I have obligations, no different than anybody else, right? If anyone tells you, with very few exceptions, if that they get up early, spend 10 hours a day doing something, you got to have some type of love for it. But anybody that tells you that money wasn't the originating component of why they're doing that, I think that's being a little dishonest. Now, as we kind of grow and we acquire wealth and things like that, it's less of an emphasis. But where I know in my audience, at least, and the folks that I interact with, they confuse their job with their obligation as a leader. And what I mean by that is, so many of us, me included, we live year to year or quarter to quarter in our professional journey. And let's get the next promotion. Let's get that next raise. Maybe I'll jump ship and go to this company because I can get a bigger raise this year if I do that instead of staying inside. But they never take the time to say, I'm going to make a difference in this role. I want to have an impact in this role. I'm aware as a leader that those on my team, they're at their dinner table, talking to their spouses about me, about how I handled a meeting, what I said, what I didn't say, how they read into something I didn't say or said. And I consider that an enormous privilege. And when you make that switch from this is my job to I get to drive an impact, I get to help someone be their best, I get to help someone on their journey, it takes on a whole new meaning. It did for me. And that's, again, back to the originating kind of question. The purpose-driven leader is one that recognizes the purpose is bigger than themselves.
So why do you think so many people, if you think about people who are getting up in the morning, they're, I don't know, getting up at 6, getting in the shower, getting in the car, going to work, the 5 o'clock hits, they're getting back in the car, they're coming home, 6 o'clock rolls around, maybe they're doing some dinner. By that time, the day is done, the day is over, you're just kind of unwinding, but they're doing this rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat, but they're not feeling that inspiration. They're not feeling that, I love getting up and doing this in the morning. I love going in and getting this done. I love going and inspiring these people. I love the work that I'm doing. It seems like that's the majority of people. And I think about company cultures, and I think about people who are going into those jobs, living very uninspired lives. And what that's got to do to just a culture in corporate America or in that workforce. Why do you think so many people are just okay with that? I mean, for me, it drives me absolutely bonkers to think about getting up and living life like that. But so many people do it. The majority of people do it.
Yeah. I think I know why, because I experienced it firsthand. So there's this cycle inside of the corporate world. And I'll be very specific in this scenario. So let's pretend you and I are on a team of 10 people inside of, Acme Inc. And
I love that's where the Wile E. Coyote used to shop, I believe.
Right on. So you and I are on this 10-person team. We've got a boss that to whom we report. He's not the kind of guy that we're going to go have drinks with. He's a guy that is more usually looking to catch us doing something wrong instead of promoting and advocating for us. So we don't really love the way he treats us. We kind of make fun of him from time to time. Well, he's actually pretty good at his job because he's managed to kind of massage you and I into performing fairly well because, we're driven guys. And because of that result and his success leading us, he gets promoted, right? Well, you and I, we always want to take on more. We're those guys. We want a bigger paycheck. We want a bigger sphere of influence. We want to have an impact. So, okay, you and I both throw our hands up and say we want to replace our beloved, at this point, boss. Well, he's now our beloved boss because he is now in the position to make the hiring decision for this opening that he has left behind. So, and I don't think this is intentional. I think when you and I and folks in the same scenario that I'm describing, we're in this scenario, we raise our hands and say we want to be in this role, we naturally start to behave in ways that we loathed in our boss before he was promoted. Why? Because we want to endear ourselves to the person making the decision that says, I'm going to get a 15 or 20% raise with this title and this promotion. So we start to endear ourselves and behave in ways that we otherwise would not have behaved. We even speak differently now because we want to be perceived as the person who is the right fit for this next role. And so it goes. So this is what happens, and it happens at all layers of every organization. But what happens when you or I get that job, we're now in that leadership position. We know where our bread is buttered. It's with the person that made the decision to put us there. And he is going to continue to drive us in ways that pissed us off when we were on the same team together. So it's natural. That's all we've seen. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to perpetrate and perpetuate rather the same leadership style that we've seen from him, which is the same that he saw from the person in front of him, and so on and so on and so on. And throughout that process, we're also told, get in line. Your opinions are kind of important, but not really, because that's not how we are here. Yeah. This is a top-down organization. So don't get too creative with your thoughts. And the more times you are creative with your thoughts and your innovation, and you want to drive change, and the more times we're told, know your role, man. You got to know your role, Rodman. You're in this role. I helped get you in this role. Let's take it easy. And the more times that happens, the less likely you are to raise your opinion, to raise your voice, to take action, to drive change. And the more often that happens, the more we shut our mouths, the more mediocre we become. And then that 6 a.m. routine starts that you mentioned. Because if you're not going to listen to me, why should I even spend the energy to raise opportunities for improvement? Why would I point out where we have an opportunity to be excellent, where we're just mediocre today? Because I'm only going to get more work out of it. And it's only going to happen if it comes from you. So why even raise my hand? So this cycle just repeats itself in every industry around the world, certainly in America, until someone is purpose-driven and makes a decision to say, enough. I'm going to lead in a way that I've never been led, be the leader I've never had, and let's see what happens. And I'm telling you, out of experience, when that decision is made, the rewards and fulfillment that come, not just from compensation and KPIs and those things, the rewards that come from that are so profound, it's hard to stop leading that way once you realize that is an alternative.
Yeah, and it seems to me like people just get into cycles, right? I mean, we get into a routine, we get into a cycle, and then we get stuck.
We
get stuck.
Yep.
We've got a job, we're making money, we've got to pay that house, we've got to pay that car. And it's over and again, over and again, over and again, rinse and repeat.
Yep.
And, you talked about being purpose-driven, but what would you tell that person who's getting up, and they're in that cycle and it's just eating them alive? I mean, because you can feel it. It's painful. It's painful being in that cycle, getting up in the morning, not wanting to go in and do something that you see no end to.
Yeah.
How do you get out of that cycle? How do you break that cycle?
Yeah, I think it starts with some serious self-reflection. And I must give this caveat. If you are that person that Rodman just described, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, because that safety has value to you. If you know that you are being less than your authentic self, you're kind of sitting on your hands, you're not voicing opportunities for improvement because you know it's not going to end well, you're not wrong for keeping your mouth shut, because we have bills. So I don't want your audience to hear that and say, well, these guys are so out of touch that, I could never lead this way or behave this way inside my organization because it wouldn't be embraced. I understand that. But the self-reflection that I think is required to start this purpose-driven and conspicuous way of living and leading, that self-reflection must take place. And if during that self-reflection you say the risks that come with me making a more overt decision to lead and live differently, the risks and potential repercussions are not worth the upside, I get it. Then you do you. But for those that on the other side of that self-reflection feel as if I've got more to give, I need to have a legacy, I want my existence on this planet to matter. And look, man, as you know, we spend roughly 100,000 hours of our lifetime on this rock working, second only to sleep. There's only one other thing on your existence that you'll do more than work, and that's sleep. So if we are going to spend so much time doing this thing called work, I think it's an obligation to question everything. Am I getting the most out of this existence? And if I'm not, create a plan to get me more out of this existence. And that's scary as shit. I won't lie. I've been there. But once you make that decision and realize the only thing stopping you is you, life becomes a little more easily attacked, especially on our professional side. And I'll say one other thing, and I get this question a lot, and I think it's related to the one you asked, is if I'm within an organization that culture is not at the forefront of everything we do, employee engagement is less than what it needs to be. Don't just throw up a white flag and say this place is too toxic. Those places do exist. I've been there as well, where the toxicity in the DNA just runs too deep, and you're not going to change that. That's the exception. I think most organizations, there is a magnetism to be created, and that means, if we're a multi-hundred organization or multi-thousand organization, if we're doing the right thing and we're cultivating great leaders who want to have an impact and they care about what we do every day, that magnetism is picked up from other teams and people around the organization. And ultimately, you'll have people fighting to be on your team. If you've created that environment, even inside of an environment of dysfunction, you can be a high functioning place where others want to work.
Sometimes we can aimlessly drift through our life, not really sure how to break the patterns and live the life that you've always dreamed of. I get it. I have been there, so caught up in chasing opportunities until I found myself in a life that felt foreign to me. It took me years to unwind the messy web to get back to what I've been put on this planet to do. And let me tell you this, purpose doesn't have to feel out of arm's reach. And I've designed a plan for you to do a little bit each day over the next 30 days in a challenge that I call the Outlier 30. It's specifically designed to help you find or create more clarity around your purpose. So if you're feeling lost and you want to finally turn things around and live that life that you were destined to create, sign up right now. It's free. You have absolutely nothing to lose and the whole world to gain.
Visit gorodman.com/outlier30 today.
Yeah, and it seems to me like if you think about companies, if I'm an entrepreneur, number one, I want to be surrounded by people who are coming there because they want to be there.
Yeah.
Because they want to be personally fulfilled, because they want to lift up others that are there. They want that culture to be something that they really, really cherish. And it's a part of who they are every single day.
Yeah.
Same thing with corporate. If it doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur, it's a business, or if you're in corporate America, somebody coming in. If I were the people who were leading the corporate environment, I would want to be creating an environment too that was conducive to leadership, to thought, to growth, having a culture where people wanted to come into the culture and be a part of it because it filled them up inside, right? But we talked a little bit about how do you break out of the cycle if you're that person going into the job. What if you're at the top? What if you're sitting there and you're going, well, I want to build a culture. I want to build leadership within my organizations that really embrace and lift people up. What do I need to do to break out of those cycles on that side of the equation?
Oh my God, I love that question because I lived that. So just for some context for your audience, I left corporate America in 2017 and I really didn't have a plan, but I had had enough. I became apathetic and disenfranchised from the very environments I was responsible for creating. Because as I mentioned, I was such a hard charger. I banged my fist on the desk type guy, and I had tremendous results, but at the wrong costs. And I told myself on that exit, because this is when I was having the health issues and the divorce and some other things that just caused me to do that self-reflection I mentioned. I was the only way I was going back into the fray was if I was given an opportunity to lead in a completely kind of independent way and be the leader I never had. And it was a conversation I had with myself. If I go back into the corporate world, I mean, I had to find a job. But I wanted to go back into a role that was similar in size and scope. So I accepted this role where I was going to lead, and I ended up leading 15,000 people in a dozen locations around the country. And really, it was a $7 billion program that I led. And the night before I was going to meet with the top 30 or 40 leaders of this organization, I had that gut check, and I had that moment, which is essentially the question you just framed. If I want to lead differently, if I want to break away from this pattern, this habit, how do I start this thing to turn around? I'll say this, it is obviously a lot easier if you're new into the role, because you can bring a new set of expectations. It's really difficult to say, hey team, I know we've worked together for a handful of years, but starting tomorrow, I'm going to lead differently. That's really challenging to do. It's not impossible, but it's really challenging to do. So that night I had my laptop in my lap, and I tried to put together a couple slides to share with this team. And the message I needed them to hear had nothing to do with me. So I'm the new guy. So they're expecting to hear, what makes me tick? Where am I taking us? What are my strategic visions? How am I going to make us better? They're expecting to hear all those things. I didn't give them any of that. I wrote these 10 sentences, and with no pre-planning, and there was no muse on my shoulder. Each of these sentences started with the word we, which turned into the 10 we's, which ultimately became the kind of the foundation for my book. But more importantly, I looked out at that crowd of 40 or 50, 30 or 40 leaders and shared these principles with them. And they were kind of stoic. And then I said, I need to be very clear. These are the principles by which I will hold you accountable. And I paused and I said, and I'm very adamant about that, because I want you to hold me accountable to these exact same principles. every single day. And I mean it, guys. If you see me not living any one of these principles, I want you to grab me by the ear and say, dude, you're not who you say you are. So for me, that's a long-winded way of answering your question, but the answer in my mind is very simple. The leader must step down off of this perfection pedestal and operate at a level at which there's no gap. So there's this leadership gap thing I talk about in my book where, what's good for me is good for me, but not necessarily for you because I have a different title and I'm allowed to behave in ways that you're not allowed. That's a leadership gap. That creates a lack of trust. So I think stepping down and saying, I am one of you, we're in this together. Everything we do, we're in this together. And there's nothing I would ask of you that I wouldn't do myself. If we got to come in on a weekend, if we got to work, I'll be there with you. But then you got to live it every single day. And I'll end the answer with this. The key component of stepping off that pedestal and putting yourself on a level playing field is relatability. When you're able to relate to those that are on your team, those that you lead, you're halfway home to trust. Because I say relatability and authenticity equals trust. And no one follows somebody they don't trust. So if they can see that I'm relatable in ways that they didn't expect, man, I got problems at home. I've got a sick child I'm dealing with, or I'm going through it, whatever the situation is, that makes me relatable to you. And then you see that I'm authentically being myself, trust naturally ensues. And that was the approach I took when I joined that organization. Parenthetically must add, that team went on a run of performance that had never been seen before, historical performance. The 10 We's are still the cultural manifesto for that organization. They have the 10 We Awards, and they still rock the 10 We bracelets, and they've got the collateral all over every one of the buildings, which tells me that message has worked and continues to work. And it's no coincidence. That's the message I evangelize around the world today now.
Yeah. So what I heard, and this is going to sound kind of weird, but we starts with you.
So true.
Is that
and
right?
I rarely say that. So true. And I rarely say that because it confuses people.
Yeah.
But
it's got to start somewhere
without me being in it, right? It's just you at that point.
Yeah. I mean, but if you're going to really enact change, if you're going to really enact and break these cycles and get to the we, you got to start with yourself. Every leader on every level has got to start with what's inside of them.
So true.
And then go create that we, which is a great place to be. If you're a group of we's working together, I mean, what you can do is unlimited compared to people who are all internal.
That's right. That's right. And you don't, brother, what an astute observation. So one of the 10 principles is we challenge each other. When I introduced these principles, I would say half the team was really optimistic and excited. A quarter of the team was on the fence. And then the last quarter was like, this guy's so full of it. Like, let's just wait and see. And I'll never forget this. There was a member of that last cohort who was a direct report of mine. I could just tell she thought I was full of it. Challenged me at every corner. It was just difficult enough to not be like disrespectful, but difficult enough to make things less efficient. And she was a naysayer, right? And if this principle of we challenge each other is to be lived every single day, that was my first test. Those that were not on board with the philosophy, those that were not on board with the 10 We's, if I didn't embrace their challenge, I would have been a hypocrite. And all of a sudden, I want us to be comfortable with challenges and challenging each other, unless it's towards me. That doesn't fly. So I lived this for several months, the first few months of that gig. And I will tell you this with so much joy. Julia is her name, and she knows I tell this story. Great friends. Years later, we haven't worked together in 5 years. We still have one-on-ones every 4 or 6 weeks to check in on each other. She helps me on my journey. I help me on hers. But I think none of that would have happened if I had been the boss I wanted to be and say, listen, damn it, I know we challenge each other, but you're being a jerk. Let's move on. I didn't do that. I earned her respect and trust over time.
Yeah. You were talking about people who embrace and people who don't. One of my favorite books that I ever have gone, and I've probably gone through this book about 10 times. I utilize it every day in my life, is the 4 Disciplines of Execution, 4DX. Yeah. A lot about setting goals, KPIs, how to really change a culture in a community and an organization.
Yeah.
And same thing, they talk about there's going to be the number of people who are going to come in and embrace it. There are going to be some of the people who are kind of like, I don't know. And then there's going to be the people who are going to be like, no way, screw you
Yeah.
guys, I'm not doing this. But you can eventually, if you do it correctly, I feel like those people who are in those categories slowly start to move in once they see how effective it is and see how much the culture is changing and see how much is changed what you're doing every single day and made things better.
If only if you're consistent. And that's where the purpose-driven component comes in being, again, conspicuous. You don't make the decision to be a great or an effective leader once. You make it every single day and multiple times in some days. Look, man, there are days whether I'm traveling to give a speech or I've got a back-to-back list of executive clients that I work with, or even I've got another business that I'm really proud of here locally that I spend a couple of days a week at. Any one of those scenarios, brother, there are days where I just don't have the juice and I just don't feel like being quote unquote on. That's not an option because I made this decision. When you make that decision that you care more about others' plight and their journey and their well-being and their development, you're going to be human. You're going to have bad days, but phoning it in is never an option. But that's a choice that has to be made again every day.
Yeah. Kyle, let's talk about your book for just a minute, because I think this is going to be a great book. I think it's going to change some lives. And I really like the premise of the book. But what do you think in your book? What would you say your biggest takeaway is from your book? I know that's a big question. I know it's got to be loaded, with such good information. But if you just said, hey, guys, read this book because this is why you need this book.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question too. You need this book because it shows in very black and white. And by the way, every presentation I get, my book cover, all of my branding, all black and white. And that's intentional because as you know, a principle is a fundamental belief. It is something we hold to be true. And if I wrote a book that have 10 guiding principles for building and sustaining a culture of excellence, it's got to be black and white. No negotiation. You need this book because it proves in great detail there is another way of more than just existing inside of the corporate world. You can actually thrive, and you don't have to be a distinguished Ivy League grad. You don't have to come from a place of privilege. You don't have to have the shiniest shoes or the most expansive vocabulary. But what you do have to do is care. You have to care about those in your circle, and you have to care about helping them be better than they were yesterday, which is ironic that it's the scenario and the recipe for helping you be better when you help others reach new heights. And the book in great detail outlines these 10 principles that are required to build this culture of excellence that you want to be a part of and be responsible for creating. And it's not hypothetical, Rodman. It's not even academic. These are approaches and principles that I have used at scale at 15,000 plus organizations as a W-2 guy leading those teams, but now doing what I do with speaking and coaching and things. It works. It absolutely works if the commitment is made.
Yeah. Yeah. So people, when they're looking at this book, this is all about being excellent. I mean,
Right.
Number one, if you're going to be excellent in anything in life, it's got to be something you care about.
That's it.
I always believe that if you're doing things that you don't care about, how are you ever going to be excellent at it? I mean, because you don't have the motivation, you don't have the excitement, you don't have the energy. It's kind of like you said, there's times where you're not there, you don't have the juice, but guess what? You're committed to something because you love it, because you want to be doing it, because you want to be helping somebody, you want to be getting up and inspiring people, right? And so I always feel like if you're aligned with your purpose and who you are, you find that juice. It's like, okay, I'm struggling today. We all struggle, right?
Yep.
There's nothing wrong with struggling or not feeling up to it or feeling up to a task. But man, if you're aligned with what you want to be doing and how you want to be doing it, you find the juice.
That's it. And I think I know that this happens a lot. Anyone in a position of authority, and that can range from a boss to a leader, someone that has direct reports. And I'm guilty of this. I did this for many years. We conflate authority with leadership. And the moment you realize you don't have to police someone for being, doing what they're doing, you don't have to look over their shoulder. You should view it through the lens of, I get to help someone. And that was a transformative moment for me when I stopped, like one-on-ones are a big example for me. Like I used to loathe doing one-on-ones with my team because I felt like it was a waste of time. I felt like they were putting on a show. I just felt like it was not as authentic and interactive as it could have been. It felt more like a check the box. The moment I transitioned from approaching those, like I have to do a one-on-one with Rodman today, to I get to do a one-on-one. I get to move some hurdles out of this guy's way. I get to help him be better. He's told me once before he wants my job ultimately. I get to help him continue on that journey to replace me. All good things. So when we stop thinking about our jobs as strictly a job and more of an opportunity to have an impact, different than our sales goals, different than anything that the business has defined for us. But I'm talking about helping another human, brother. That's why we're here. That's why we're here. And I've been given an opportunity to make money to help others on their journey. Are you kidding me? What a privilege.
Oh, no, it's 100% a privilege. I mean, anytime you get an opportunity to lead and help other people, absolutely every single day. I mean, that's where it starts. That's where the heart works best, is lifting other people up, because, life is short. Like you said, we're spending so much time of our days going to a job or sleeping. There's just so many little things that we don't get to do or we're not doing. But the second that we get to help lift somebody else up, and there's nothing greater in life than that person coming back around or seeing them excel, seeing them be great. I mean, for me, the most fulfilling thing in the world, right, is that person that you've gotten up and you've invested into and that you've worked with and that you've helped 2 years later, 5 years later, whatever it might be. You're looking back at them and they're looking at you and they're saying, man, thank you. Yeah. I mean, wow, what a way to fill yourself up inside.
Rodman, are there 1, 2, 3 people on your journey that you look back and say, I'm so grateful for that person, he or she, I wouldn't be in this chair if it weren't for them?
100%. Right. I mean, I think every single one of us has that person.
Yep.
And you got to think about, who can you be for that next person?
That's it. And I do. There are a handful of people that I just consider myself so fortunate to have crossed paths with them. And I think it's an obligation to do for others what they did for me. Not a nice to have, not something that I probably should do. It's the right thing.
100%. And, it's kind of like giving thanks. Like, a lot of people go through that life and maybe they're not thinking about the people who really had an impact on them. Maybe they do. Maybe everybody does. Maybe I'm just wrong on this, but I kind of think about how people go in and, when you get unappreciative at times, because we've all get in that spot too, where we're not appreciating something, we're not appreciating people, we're not appreciating, but if people really took a step back at times and just really thought about their life and how they transitioned, everybody's going to find great people in their lives that got them to where they are now. Of course, there are a lot of people also who have not so great people in their lives who might have taken them downward or spiraled them down, right? We have both of those.
So true.
But that's why it's so important to be a leader, and to be a leader that goes and makes change in as many lives as you can, right? To make sure that you're lifting people, even the people who had the bad people in their lives who had them spiraling downward. How can we be a leader that lifts those people up, especially, and gives them opportunity and hope?
Yeah. Especially those people.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I have this, not debate, I have this conversation with a good friend of mine often, like, where is happiness actually found? Is it the person that has no responsibility, has ultimate or unlimited funds in the bank, and travel anywhere? Like, that sounds pretty awesome to me. It does. But also, I think that's fleeting, and that has a time limit on it. It has an expiration date. Because the fulfillment that comes with helping others on their journey is something that is timeless. Because if a fella or a woman in my past that helped me along my journey, and I pay that forward, and hopefully that person pays it forward, dude, the impact that has on the world is so much more significant than really just about anything else I can think of, other than maybe being a parent. But in some ways it's similar, because you're helping people on their journey and you hope that they pay it forward. But all of that, again, brother, comes back to making the choice to do that. You have to choose. So I'll tell you a really quick story. There's a guy that I was fortunate enough to study under while I was in business school. I respect his name's Harry Kramer. I respect Harry Kramer just about, if not more than anybody else professionally that I've ever known and worked with. And I was on a call with a coaching client of mine recently, who I didn't know this going into this story. He we were in the middle of our conversation, and he mentioned spending some time at an executive kind of training place at a university where I went to business school, right? And he said there was a professor in there who held my book up and said, if you guys haven't heard of Begin With We or aren't aware of Kyle McDowell, this book has a lot of power. You should check it out. I didn't realize this. That introduction of Mr. Kramer holding that book up was what turned this person, who is now my client, into a fan. So he reached out. I didn't know how he found me, didn't know the whole book. I didn't know any of that. When I heard this was just last week, when I heard the role that Harry played in this gentleman finding me, I thought to myself, wow, how cool, really important. This guy, he didn't have to do that. He helped me out in ways that matter and mean a lot to me. Most people would be grateful for that and go on about their day. I made it a point to call Harry, who I haven't spoken to in half a dozen years, to say, that's not true. Maybe spoke to him a couple of years ago, but not as consistently as I used to. The point is when someone does something for you that you recognize as helping you along your journey, thank them. Let them know. Tell them the impact you had. Why? Because two things will happen. They're likely to do it again for somebody else because they know how good it felt to hear that feedback from you. And since you're in that giving mode of saying thank you to that person, you're more likely to give to someone else in the way that that person gave to you. So that's the choice that has to be made, is to put yourself in the shoes of the other person and recognize how good that feels and how they're going to pay that forward and the importance of that paying it forward.
Well, and not just the recognition, but then he took your words and your knowledge and he shared it with somebody else, and you were able to have an impact because he was leading in how he was sharing your information.
Yeah. So true.
So, I
That's how you
feel like
it's really cool. You can judge someone. It's an old cliche that I'll probably botch, but you can really judge someone by how they treat someone who can do nothing for them. You know, if someone does, like, if he has no benefit in doing that, which he doesn't, you know, other than it's the right thing because he thinks my words can help, like that's the sign of someone who really cares about others. And I think it's a sign of someone's character. It's you know, similar to, like, you can judge someone by how they treat people when they're not looking, if there's no one watching, like the janitor or somebody that, you know, you might flippantly think that you are better than that person because of their economic status or the role that they play. But when you treat those, it's so true. You can really tell who someone is and who they aren't when they behave in a way that is something they would not be proud of if it were blast all over the company internet or intranet or some newsletter. And he didn't have to do that for me, which makes it more powerful.
Yeah, it's selfless. It's
cool,
selfless.
right?
And,
so cool.
You know, and I think there's a quote, I'll butcher a quote too. It's, you know, the quote goes into how we sit with the broken is so important, you know, and it's kind of like, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, it's easy to get people who are already up and who are already lifted and who are already doing leadership is really easy. But a true measure of a person is how we're sitting with the broken and how we're lifting them up.
So true, dude.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Never heard that one. That's
no,
good.
And I probably butchered it. So if you go look it up, it's probably going to be a very different quote, but that's the gist of the quote. I've always loved that quote, right? Because it's so true and how we treat people. And, you know, a lot of people that we try to lead don't need our leadership as much as there's a lot of people who really need our leadership and really need to be included into the we that a lot of times we're rejecting or we're not accepting.
Yeah. Yeah. So cool. Well said. I'm taking that with me today, brother. That's a good one.
So I know that we're running out of a little bit of time here. Unfortunately, you and I, by the way, we could have this conversation all day long. I love talking about leadership and, you know, your knowledge and what you have is so deep. Matter of fact, I feel like we could even get onto another podcast and do this again. So
say the word. I'm here, brother. Say the word. I'm here. Yeah. Say the word. I'm back.
Yeah, for sure. But for people who are sitting out there listening, going, you know, I want to be a part of that culture. I want to be this good leader. Where can they connect with you? Where can they find your book?
Yeah. So I don't know that we've actually mentioned, the name of the book is Begin With We, 10 Principles for Building and Sustaining a Culture of Excellence. I'm so humbled to share that it's a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller. We just passed 10,000 books sold.
Wow.
Yeah, man, it's just mind bending to me. It was a little passion project that I had at first. That's become my real purpose. It's why I'm here. So that's the book. It's available wherever books are sold. Audio book is available, Kindle, hardcover, paperback. And my website is Kyle McDowell Inc. And I'm on essentially every social platform with a handle of @Kyle McDowell Inc. And I'm so glad you asked that, because I think in most podcasts, people are trying to promote something or promote themselves, and that's why they share their social media handles. I share that because I want to hear from people who need help. I want to hear from those that I might be able to share a little bit of experience that I've kind of picked up through my journey, and see if there's something if I can do to help that. I just think it's an obligation to help others along your journey. And that's what I'm committed to doing. So if any of your audience is keen to level up, their own, and I even hate using that expression, but, be a better leader, be the leader they never had, or they're dealing with a circumstance inside of work that's caused them pause and say, this is maybe not the right thing for me, give me a shout. I'm here.
Absolutely. Love it. And I couldn't agree with you more. It's, again, going back to the selfless service, right? How can we lift other people up? And you're doing it through your words and through your writing. So I think that's fantastic. But I got one more question for you, and I ask this to everybody. Last question of the day. And, it's kind of a tough question, because narrowing this down to one thing is usually a little bit difficult. But if you could go back into time and have, say, coffee with your younger self, and there was one piece of advice that you wanted to give yourself, what do you think the most valuable piece of advice that you could give yourself would be?
You might have to beep this. Don't give a shit about what anybody else says you can or cannot do. Do not. Don't allow someone else's limited beliefs, their limitations, their fear. Do not allow that to encroach upon who you are. Because and this is something I would have answered that question so dramatically differently just 2 years ago. But now I'm convinced, and I'm certain you live this way. I don't know you that well, but I'm certain you live this way. Your limitations, my limitations, our limitations, they exist, but they are only there as long as we allow them to be there. I'm convinced I will spread this message as far and as wide as the universe will allow me, because I am committed to doing that. And the level of effort that I expend on this mission is directly correlated to the impact that it has. And I'm not naive. There are people that have either read the book or maybe have worked with me in the past that says, this is a fad. He's not going to. No, I don't give a shit any longer when anybody else says I can and cannot do, because I know what I'm capable of, and only you know what you're capable of. So don't allow others to weigh in on where your limitations might or might not be.
Absolutely love that. I mean, so many people weigh other people's opinions above their own. People who have no idea who they are on the inside, and that drives me absolutely crazy. So I think that's a great piece of advice.
Hey, real quick, the way you just said that reminded me, I have no affiliation with this guy. Michael Gervais just wrote this book, The First Rule of Mastery: Stop Worrying About What Other People Think of You. He calls it FOPO, fear of other people's opinion. Not a plug. Don't know him at all. This book has been really powerful for me, and it's helped me along that. Look, because we all suffer from things like imposter syndrome. Am I good enough? Like, if anyone tells you they don't, they either are lying, or they have suppressed it when they were really bad about it. And that's what this book aims to get at. And that's a good read. And the way you frame that is, it reminded me that book was sitting there.
So we got two good reads now.
Yes, sir.
Your book and that one. That'll be great.
In that order.
In that order. Exactly.
Yeah, man.
Kyle, thanks. I appreciate you being on the show today. This has been fantastic. And we are definitely going to do this again.
It's my pleasure. Thank you again for having me, man. Just keep doing what you're doing. You and your team have a really important mission, and it's working. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thanks, Kyle.
You bet.